Please, welcome to the April meeting 2022 of the Toowoomba Regional Council. Can I welcome those in the room? Can I also recognise Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff, who's attending this meeting online today? Can I recognise our staff and those who are here? Can I also recognise those people who are watching us online, on the social media channels? Can I begin today by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands on which we meet today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal, the Jarrawa and the Bigambal peoples. And can I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Councillors and ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the year when we remember how very fortunate we are to in fact live in this great nation. It's a time also to remember those who sacrificed to fight for the freedoms that we so well enjoy here in this country. And there is an Australian Defence Force Veterans Covenant that I will read out to you. We, the people of Australia, respect and give thanks for all who have served in our Defence Force and their families. We acknowledge the unique nature of military service and the sacrifice demanded by all who commit to defend our nation. We undertake to preserve the memory and the deeds of all who have served and promise to welcome, embrace and support all military veterans as respected and valued members of our community. For what they have done, this we will do. This week, of course, later this week and early next week, in fact, we have Anzac Day, and I know each and every one of my colleagues will be very active on that day as we remember and pay our personal tributes to those who've served this country. Today, can I also recognise the passing of a former Chair and Councillor of the Cambodia Shire Council, George Hannaford, a long-serving councillor and Chair of that organisation, and sadly he's passed away in recent times. Our thoughts and our prayers are with his family, and we thank him and the family for the service that he gave. There are no apologies today. Nobody has sought leave of absence. A number of declarations are on the table. They'll be dealt with as we move forward. Councillor Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to apply for a leave of absence, please.
Yes.
For the dates of the 27th of April 2022 until the 13th of May 2022.
Councillor Melissa Taylor has sought leave from the 27th of April to the 13th of May. Do I have a mover? Councillor Tim McMahon, Councillor Nancy Summerfield. Those in favour? That's carried. Any other leave of absence? Councillor Carroll?
No, Mr Chair, not a leave of absence as such, but I would like to bring to the attention of the Mayor the passing of Cathy Hartley, who was a former councillor, a long-serving councillor of the Rosalie Shire, and a colleague and friend of many of us, and we might just remember her for a short time this morning as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Yes, that's an error of mine. I should have brought that forward too. She was well respected and certainly served the Rosalie Shire particularly well over a long period of time, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family. I have had communications with her husband and on behalf of all of us, and thanked him for her contribution to our community. Any other matters anyone wishes to bring up prior to us moving forward? Move down to item 3, which is a confirmation of the minutes. Oh, the declarations. Right, we have a number of declarations here. Councillor Taylor, in respect to item 8.2.
Sorry, I forgot. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I request that it be minuted that I declared a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item number 6, the confidential item, new energy generation, invitation to tender stage 3 update at the Water and Waste Committee meeting on the 12th of April 2022, and of Council's decision to allow me to participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter. And just for those who weren't watching at that time, I have a friendship with a landowner adjoining this project, but I don't believe it, and Council has decided that it doesn't stop me from being able to participate and vote on the matter. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Carl, you have a declaration.
Thank you, Chair. I request that it be minuted that I declared a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item number 6, confidential new energy generation tender to invite stage 3 update at the Water and Waste Committee meeting on the 12th of April 2022, and of Council's decision to allow me to participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter. And it was in relation to a former working relationship of one of the people involved with the tender. A working relationship way back on Crow's Nest Council days.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carl. Move then to Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff.
Thank you, Chair. I request that it be minuted that I declared a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item number 3, Community Grants Program, March 2021-22, Consolidated Approval Round 2, rows 53 and 62, at the Environment and Community meeting of the 13th of April. As the relevant circumstances have not changed, I will leave and stay away from the place where the meeting is being held while this matter is discussed and voted on.
Thanks, Councillor Von Hoff. Can I declare that I request that it be minuted that I declared a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 03, Community Grants Program, March 21-22, Consolidated Approval Round 2, row 43, at the Environment Community Committee meeting on the 13th of April 2022. As the relevant circumstances have not changed, I will leave and stay away from the place where the meeting is being held while this matter is being discussed and voted on. All the declarations are now on the table.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask a question over here?
Yes.
For someone online, how is that? How does that work operationally if they're out of the meeting? Can you just explain that to me?
It is my understanding that that Kirsten will mute Councillor Von Hoff at that point in time.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We move then to item 3, which is a confirmation of the minutes. Firstly, 3.1 of the ordinary meeting of Council on the 15th of March 2022, at which all councillors were present. Do I have a mover? Councillor McDonald has moved. A seconder, please. Councillor O'Shea. Any discussion? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. Move then to item 3.2. Held on the 6th of April 2022, Councillor Summerfield and myself were absent from that meeting. Do I have a mover who was at the meeting? Councillor O'Hara Sullivan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McDonald. Any questions? Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to item 4. Is there any business arising out of those minutes that anyone wishes to discuss at this point in time?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank you, Mayor. I speak in regard to item number 17 of the ordinary meeting of Council on March 15, 2022, titled Confidential Reappointment of the Chief Executive Officer. Councillors Melissa Taylor, Summerfield, Carl and myself are co-signatories on a letter which we present to you now for your receipt regarding business arising out of the minutes of the previous meeting. This confidential letter will be circulated as a courtesy with all councillors today, understanding that you require the opportunity at the conclusion of today's ordinary meeting of Council to note its contents. We ask that this letter be considered. Noting its confidentiality, this letter should be included in the minutes of today's ordinary meeting of Council as a formal record of business arising out of the minutes of the previous meeting, specifically item 17, confidential reappointment of the Chief Executive Officer. Thank you.
So you would like that to be recorded as part of the minutes of this coming meeting?
That's right. Thank you, Mayor.
CEO, how do we handle this? Do we want to deal with this in a confidential matter later in the meeting?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor, but I think you just wanted that minuted as a confidential record against the council, previous council decision. Is that correct?
We want it to be minuted that there's been formal correspondence received by the Mayor in regard to that item.
Okay, thank you. What, Brian, the process of doing that is?
Well, technically this is post the meeting, so it wasn't actually part of the minutes at that particular point in time. It wasn't a consideration that council took at that particular point in time. Perhaps maybe that it gets tabled later on the agenda as part of other business that council, general business that council may wish to consider, and you table it at that particular point in time, if council wants to give permission for that to happen.
Through you, Chair, to the CEO. CEO, wouldn't it be minuted under item 4 business arising out of minutes of previous meetings at this meeting, and we would vote to confirm this meeting's minutes at the following month's ordinary meeting of council?
The current business arising out of that is basically anything in relation to the considerations that were made at that particular point in time. So this is without having an understanding of what the contents are, I'm assuming that it's information that's post the consideration of that particular council at that particular point in time. So it's not an amendment to the resolution or a correction or correcting an error that may have been made in the minutes at that particular point in time. So I think from what you're saying, it's something, a further consideration that you just want to get on the council record, and that you could do that through general business at that point in time.
That's correct.
Sorry, could I?
Councillor Summerfield, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. I believe it needs to be attached to the business arising in the minutes. It's business arising from the minutes of the last meeting, and that's what it's addressing. And I believe, and it's being raised in business arising, and I believe it needs to be attached to the minutes as a documented document, as business arising from the last minutes.
I haven't had a chance to go right through this, Councillor Summerfield, but there's some matters there that probably need some discussion. And I just wonder if it's not appropriate that we have that discussion before we put it as part of the minutes.
Mayor, could I suggest that there probably are some subjects in there that do need discussion, but it's not necessary at this meeting. It could be that it could be workshopped down the track, or if you wanted to have a special meeting about it, that could happen. But this actual document needs to be attached to the minutes as business arising from the minutes.
Okay. Mr. CEO, how do we handle this in terms of the procedural aspect of it?
I think it's in your hands to decide. I've given the advice. I think without knowing what the content is, if it's not a consideration that was made at that particular point in time, it's a new issue that could be considered just through general business at some time in the future. And then those discussions, be they confidential, could be made at that further meeting. Otherwise, you've got, the decision is made at that particular time, was made on the relevant information that council considered at that point in time. So if there's additional considerations, then I think that should be considered as a new matter, but it's up to the council to determine how they wish to deal with it.
Councillor Carl, you indicated a comment.
Yes, please, Chair. I stand to be corrected. My understanding is that it is matters specifically arising from the confidential matter regarding the appointment of the CEO, reappointment. There are matters specifically raised regards process. So therefore, it would be my understanding that given that you call for business arising, there are matters raised specifically to that. How you choose to handle them later on in the day and in a confidential session is your prerogative, but I do believe that when businesses called businesses arising is called for specifically about matters, any matters in the previous meeting, that they could be tabled as business arising and recorded against this meeting. That's my
In the
understanding.
course of this meeting, at the end of the meeting.
Just recorded as business arising, and then it would be your discretion as to how you choose to deal with that moving forward, whether it's a discussion at the end of the meeting today in confidential session, or if you so wish that matters needed to be raised further down the track, as Councillor Summerfield has suggested, there could be time set aside to discuss that further. But it's not new business, it's directly related to business that happened previous meeting on the 15th.
Yep. I've got Councillor Carol Taylor and then Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I suggest that the CEO takes an opinion from LGAQ and the Department of Local Government and Planning, and because Council's had a discussion and a vote on a position of a staff member of this council, the only one that we can actually have a discussion and a decision on. And I suggest that anything outside that, like something like this, it's not natural justice for something that was decided for it to come back as a new issue. So I would myself suggest that this morning, whilst this meeting's in progress, that an opinion be asked of both the LGAQ and the Department of Local Government. Thank you.
Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate some comments made by Councillor Summerfield and Councillor Carl. I do believe that it is part of business arising. It does not include any additional considerations, and it does not add any new business. The letter is specifically about processes that occurred during that confidential session. It has nothing about new business or any additional considerations. It is purely about business that arose out of that confidential situation or meeting. So it is not part of general business. It is purely business arising out of the minutes.
Thank you. Any other comments around the room?
Yes, Chair. Can I just also add that this letter has arisen after seeking the advice from the LGAQ, and as Councillor Taylor just said, and as all of us have said, this is not raising matters for consideration. This is business arising out of the minutes of the previous meeting for Noctin.
Thank
So
you.
it should just be a formal record of business arising out of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to make a comment here that it's not polite nor in consideration of your fellow councillors for some councillors to have knowledge of something that's coming forward in this manner and others not to have been given a copy of this. Thank you.
I'll seek advice. Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I understand your position, but due to the confidentiality of the situation, we deemed it best to raise it first in this meeting, and we will be circulating that to all councillors for their reading and consideration later in the day. But due to the high confidentiality of the situation and the matter, it was best that it was dealt this way.
So we are the council. All 11 of us are the council.
Well, that would appear to me as if once that matter has been circulated, that we ought to arrange a special meeting to discuss this particular matter that you have brought forward. Are you comfortable with that? Are the 4 signatories to the letter?
Sorry, can you just repeat that, Mr Chair? I couldn't understand.
It would appear to me that it would be best if we took advice and as soon as we could from a legal position here and make absolutely sure that when we met we had that advice rather than meeting this afternoon without that advice.
You can, Mr Chair, you can certainly seek advice, but as Councillor Von Hoff has stated, we have sought advice from the LGAQ. So,
Thank you. Councillor Shine.
No, thanks, Mayor. Of course, we don't know what the advice was from the LGAQ, but I was just wondering if the CEO perhaps could inform us as to whether he's aware of any precedent of the inclusion of a document of this nature in minutes in the past.
No, not in recent times, not new material being presented. Usually it's corrections or things that have fallen out that where council specifically said that they want to deal with another matter in a future meeting so it's been raised at that particular time. But if there's further considerations that would result from this submission of this letter, then I would think that's new material that would need consideration of the whole council so they could make an informed decision in relation to the implications of that.
Any other comments on the matter? Councillor Carl.
So I just reiterate, Mr Chair, my comments before. It's for noting there was no requested business to eventuate from this item. It was actually for formal noting for records. There's no request. As I said before, it'll be entirely your prerogative at a future date if you wish to take the matter up further, but the letter is not requesting specific actions nor any further actions. It is exactly for noting as per the item and how it unfolded in the meeting. That's all. There's no requests, but I'd say that's for you to decide what you want to do with it. But I do concur with comments prior that it's important that it is noted, and if you so wish to deal with it at a later date with the whole council, then that's your prerogative.
Well, I think that's the attitude that I'm taking towards it at the moment, Councillor Carl. It's in front of me. There are 4 main points. I haven't been able to even scan quickly those main points. I've just seen a couple of them, and I think, in fact, there may well be some answers to a couple of the points that I've seen. But I think it's appropriate that we came together as a group, the whole 11 of us, and we dealt with it on advice from the various parties. Any other comments around the room?
Chair.
Mayor, Councillor Woodhoff, if you so choose to do that, be that as it may, we still request that it's noted as formal correspondence to you.
Would you repeat that, please?
Mayor, I was saying that should you decide to consider the issues raised in the letter as an entire council, that would be your decision. Regardless, though, the request is that you receive that correspondence and note it as a formal piece of correspondence received as business arising out of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Okay. Brian, would you like to comment on how that can be achieved?
If council wished, they could consider that in general business. They could, obviously you'd have to get the permission of the council to deal with it in general business, so you could make it move that one of the councils, going to be Councillor Von Hoff, could move that the letter be received in general business, get council's permission to do so, and then take a formal vote as to what you wish to do in relation to how you're going to deal with the issues that are within that letter. And you can do that confidentially if that's necessary, or it may not be necessary.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I'll say this publicly. I find it very offensive that it wasn't shared, that confidentiality wasn't considered to have been important with this council when we deal with confidential matters on a day-to-day basis. I find it not as paying as part of a team. Thank you.
Councillor Tim, and then Councillor Tim McMahon, then Councillor McDonald.
Look, thanks, Chair. If I could just interject here with the greatest of respect. We've just been handed a confidential letter that we, the council, are asked to note How can we note something that no one knows what's in it except the 4 signatories? Then we've been quoted apparent legal advice from the LGAQ that none of us have seen, and I find it rather disrespectful that we're doing this in an open meeting with apparent confidential material that hasn't even had the respect to the other people around this table to let us know what's in it. If it's a personal letter to the Mayor, send it to the Mayor's inbox at his office. Why do you need to grandstand in a general meeting? Now, I would actually really like to see the contents of that letter.
Point
to
of
all
order, Mr
councillors
Mayor. No one's
Yes.
grandstanding.
Before
That's
we,
offensive.
Councillor Carl, just let
bringing
Councillor
this,
McMahon
no,
finish,
I'll
please.
continue. Thanks, Chair. I would like to see everyone given equal respect and shown the contents of such letter before we're asked to note it or talk about it or bring it forward in a general meeting. I find that quite disrespectful to all members around this table, and I'd just like to have that said. If it needs to be brought, bring it. No disrespect to those bringing it, but I think we need to follow process. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. We're asked to note a lot of things throughout the course of our duties as a councillor, and we don't know details, but we're asked to note, and we can specifically deal with it in detail at a later date. That's why it's for noting in a meeting. And it was an agenda item, and it was addressing some issues around agenda item, which I fail to see which councillor would be unaware of that item or the agenda or the process. Because
Order, please.
It was the previous meeting. I'm sorry, councillors, we're all aware of that process. We all sat in the room. There's nothing untoward here as suggested. We are merely bringing forward a business arising for noting. There are many items that come before council for noting that we don't know the intimate details from. There's nothing new in this letter about what transpired on the day.
Thank you, Councillor Carl. I'll hand over to Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Shea.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor McMahon pretty well summed up my feelings, but I think we need to move forward from here. So you received a letter from a group of councillors as deemed as business arising from the minutes. Now, that could have quite easily been, if there is concern with how the meeting was conducted or the process, this is not the place to do that. With respect, this is not the place to do that. Unknowing of what the contents are, we have an opportunity here to receive that correspondence and defer any conversation to the confidential part of this meeting. And I'm happy to move that happens. Not recorded as business arising. It may well be that down the track when we know what it is, but we simply don't know what it is. So let's move that we shift this correspondence to the confidential part of this meeting for an open discussion. It may well mean that the CEO is removed from the room for that discussion, and I don't know. So we need to do that at that time. This is completely and utterly disrespectful of the process that we align ourselves to and the culture that we have in this organisation. Absolutely disrespectful. So, Mayor, I move that we shift this item, this correspondence, to the confidential, and it be dealt with at that time.
Councillor Taylor has seconded that. Now, Councillor O'Shea, you don't wish to speak? Anyone wishing to debate that motion? You have a comment, Councillor Summerfield?
I do, Mayor. It was raised that the process should have been that we wrote to yourself. That wasn't the appropriate process. The appropriate process is to put it in business arising from the last meeting. And that's what we have done. Under advice too, I might add, that is why we have done it. But the main reason we have done this is we want it documented, our concerns.
Yeah,
We want
I
a
think
record in minutes of our concerns, of the processes. That's the reason why.
Mayor, we've got a
done
mover and a
this.
seconder for that motion.
Got a mover and a seconder. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? That the motion is that it be brought forward in confidential later today.
I will speak against that motion for the sake of open debate instead of being stifled and contained to confidential discussion. And exactly for the reasons Councillor Summerfield has stated, that all we wanted was our formal concerns noted for the record. not relegated to backroom confidential discussion.
As moved with the motion, Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mayor. Not knowing the contents of this letter, I'm not disagreeing with Councillor Cole, I'm not disagreeing with anyone. The simple fact is we've been given this correspondence. The opportunity to deal with the confidential item is in confidential. We need to show respect to everyone in this organisation, including those around the table. And clearly that hasn't happened in this case. So I move it, we've got a seconder for it, and let's deal with it at the appropriate time.
The letter is in fact addressed to me as the Mayor, and it's headed in bold type, confidential. So I would imagine the suggestion that's come forward in the motion is a reasonable suggestion. By my calculation, I'm happy to bring it up today and plan a pathway forward as how it can be dealt with. And that may mean that we need to take, I don't want to be involved in a heavy discussion on this today without advice. Anyone wishing to speak, are you happy to have spoken enough for the motion? Councillor Cale, do you wish to speak against it? Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Cale has spoken against the motion.
Yes, I know, but he spoke before Councillor McDonald did. So anyone else wishing to speak anyway? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Motion is carried. Oh, Councillor Von Hoff, your vote, obviously.
Against, Mayor, just wasn't necessary, but thank you.
Good. Motion is carried. We'll move then to the presentation of petitions. Are there any petitions to be brought forward today? Organised here. No petitions. Well, councillors, I formally received a letter from the Deputy Mayor, former Deputy Mayor, Councillor McDonald, today, a letter of resignation as at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the 19th of April. The matter will be brought forward as a mayoral minute, a minute without notice, matter without notice. Councillor McDonald has formally advised me in a letter received by me this morning that he has resigned from the Deputy Mayor's position immediately prior to the commencement of this morning's meeting, April ordinary meeting of Council, and will accept the nomination to restand for the Deputy Mayor position. Therefore, I propose for Council to immediately deal with this by having the business matter of appointing the Deputy Mayor considered without notice under item 6 of the agenda. To enable the nomination and acceptance of nominations for Deputy Mayor, I propose to firstly move the following motion to suspend standing orders. I move that in accordance with Clause 12 of the Best Practice Standing Orders for Local Government and Standing Committee Meetings, September 2020, standing orders be suspended for the period of consideration of the item. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Carol Taylor. Any discussion? Those in favour of that motion? It's carried without dissent. Councillors, it is now processed to call nomination for the Deputy Mayor of the Toowoomba Regional Council. Councillors can nominate any councillor, and I propose each nominee to be allowed 2 minutes presentation to Council to support their case for being appointed as the Deputy Mayor. In calling for nominations, I ask each nominated councillor, unless nominated, as to whether they accept or otherwise. So is there any nominations? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I have never believed that the Deputy Mayor position should be awarded by a popularity contest. I believe the Deputy Mayor should be a reflection or an endorsement of the team that they work with. That person should have gained the respect of the team, not demanded or assumed it. I have always taken people as they present to me, not on their resume or the school they went to or the family they come from. The Deputy Mayor should be the conduit from the councillors to the Mayor. They should be the person who unites the team, a collaborative person, a problem solver. Someone who is generous with their support of their colleagues and the staff. Someone who is modest and humble and champions the region in a respectful and reasonable manner. And that is why, Mr Mayor, I am nominating Councillor McDonald for the position of Deputy Mayor. He is that person. He has demonstrated those qualities day in and day out for the 6 years that I have worked with him. Thank you.
Are there any further nominations? Councillor McDonald, do you accept that nomination?
I accept the nomination. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Summerfield?
You asked if there were any further nominations. I put my hand up, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to nominate Rebecca von Hoff, please.
Okay, Councillor Summerfield has nominated Councillor Rebecca von Hoff. Councillor von Hoff, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I do, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? If not, I will just, first of all, allow each nominated person to speak for 2 minutes, and following that, I'll go through the process that, explain the process that's involved in it. But first of all, over to you, Councillor McDonald, the first nominated.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words, and can I firstly acknowledge yourself and councillors and that of Councillor Megan O'Sullivan for having faith in me by nominating for the Deputy Mayor position for the remainder of this term of council. It has been an honour to hold the position of Deputy Mayor since the 23rd of April 2020, and I would want to assure my colleagues and the community that the responsibility that comes with this position is never lost on me. With the benefit of the last 2 years' experience in the role, it is clearer by the day that there are many qualities that are required to successfully undertake the role of Deputy Mayor. Over the last 2 years, with the community at the heart of all decision-making, the positive working relationship I have enjoyed with the Mayor, CEO and each member of the executive leadership team has been built on the core values of Toowoomba Regional Council: honesty, accountability, respect, teamwork, safety and wellbeing. A relationship built on trust has provided the ability to have honest conversations in a respectful manner for the common good of our community. Living these values each day has been the hallmark of my relationship with the Mayor, the CEO and the executive leadership team. There is no denying that our region has been through tough and challenging times over the last 2 years. Challenges will continue to confront us. However, with a positive, proactive approach, many opportunities for our community will also rise. A new planning scheme and a new corporate plan are two strategic opportunities that excite me over the next 2 years. Supporting the Mayor in his role will be even more important, as both these strategic bodies of work are over and above his day-to-day responsibilities, and I stand ready to continue to serve the community as the Deputy Mayor of the Toowoomba Regional Council. Thank you again, Councillor Megan.
Councillor Summerfield?
Mayor, are we allowed to ask questions?
Well, I guess you can. It's not normally the procedure, but...
Well, I think it helps us to understand who we're voting for.
This is a rather unusual concept, but you have a brief question?
I do, thank you. For me personally, this current style of leadership is not working. We've had 2 years for it to change for the better, and for me, since I've been on this council in 2012, it hasn't. So I listened to what
Councillor Summerfield,
I listened to
is
what
this
Councillor
appropriate?
Jeff just said, and he said he's had a good working relationship
Point
with
of order,
the
Chair.
Mayor,
This is a
CEO
statement.
and ELT.
This is
What
not a
about the
question.
other
Councillor-
Point of order.
councillors?
Councillor Summerfield, I think you're speaking clearly against a nominee, and I don't know whether that's appropriate in these circumstances. I think the best thing I can do now is hand over to Councillor von Hoff and we hear from her, and then we go and formally proceed with the whole thing. I'm rather disappointed that you made the comment you made. Councillor von Hoff.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Councillor Summerfield for the nomination, and obviously being unable to be there in person because of COVID isolation is very far from ideal. I would have liked for you all to have been able to see me in person when we made this decision, but That's the way things are, so on we go. I just want us today, for a moment, to think about process. Put everything else aside and think about process. We're halfway through a 4-year term of council. Now, 2 years ago, the people of Toowoomba Region voted to elect 10 councillors and 1 mayor to represent them. 2 years ago this month, the decision was made to set aside the tradition that the person who topped the poll amongst councillors become deputy mayor. The person who received 2,375 fewer votes was instead appointed. The argument then by some councillors was that the person who got the most votes did not have the experience to be deputy mayor. The decision was made to instead appoint the person who got the second highest number of votes to be deputy mayor, and that this council would revise that decision. That process has brought us to where we are today. This is not about me, and it is not about Councillor McDonald. It's about what sort of council this is. Is this a council that does what it says it was going to do? Is this a council that genuinely respects what the community says? Or is this a council that shifts the goalposts? Is this a council that is all talk about promoting leadership? Is this a council that knows fair and reliable process is essential for good governance and for the community to have confidence in what happens at City Hall? We all know that Councillor McDonald and Councillor Antonio are extremely close. Cut from the same cloth, peas in a pod. But being close mates shouldn't determine what goes on at council, and it shouldn't determine the decision that we make today. Today, I also ask you to consider the future. What happens after the next election? What justification and rationale does this council use to appoint a deputy mayor? If we return to the process of whoever receives the most votes be supported as deputy mayor, what happened in 2020 can be an aberration, and this council reverts its process.
Can you wind up, please? We're over the 2 minutes now.
Well, Mayor, respectfully, I wasn't aware that there was a 2-minute timeline prior to this. I ask for your indulgence. That process is straightforward and sound because it reflects democracy. And anyone who thinks that they might top the poll and be deputy mayor in the future needs to vote according to that principle today. Otherwise, they can't expect to rely on that process in the future. Supporting the person with the most votes has served this community and this council well in the past. We can look to the past and know with confidence that this is a process that works. I just ask councillors to use logic and courage today. Courage to vote as you would if this were a secret ballot, and logic to support the process of appointing the deputy mayor. It's worked for this council in the past, and if it's supported today, that process can work for this council in the present and in the future. This would be a defensible and logical vote to vote according to process.
Thank you very much. Councillors, we move now to the stage where I've sought advice from the CEO and its recommended method of appointing the Deputy Mayor to comply with the Local Government Act and regulations, and in particular, the local government principles. It was recommended that we should use the following procedure when there was more than one nominee for Deputy Mayor. First of all, if the majority of councillors vote in favour of the first nominee being appointed, they are. But first of all, in regard to the first nominee, I would need a mover and a seconder for their nomination. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan has moved. A seconder, please. Councillor Shine has seconded. Councillors will now move to a formal vote in favour of Councillor MacDonald being appointed as the first nominee to the position of Deputy Mayor. Sorry? Oh, first of all, would someone be prepared to move that we restore standing orders? Councillor Carroll-Taylor has moved. Councillor MacDonald has seconded. Those in favour of the restoration of standing orders? That's carried. So, councillors, we have a mover and a seconder for Councillor MacDonald's nomination. We'll now move to the vote. Those in favour of Councillor MacDonald's nomination as Deputy Mayor of the Toowoomba Regional Council? 7 votes. That brings the matter to a conclusion. Councillor MacDonald has...
Have I requested a division of the vote?
You request there be another vote?
No, Mayor.
A division?
Of the vote.
I am having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Councillor Von Hoff. I'm sorry about that. But it was a bit fluffy. I didn't quite hear what you heard. Right, there has been a division, and would Kirsten, you will sort out the division. I hereby declare Councillor MacDonald as the Deputy Mayor of the Toowoomba Regional Council under the Act.
Mayor, could I just say very quickly, and I appreciate the majority vote here today, but I also reinforce my support for other councillors to also assist where I can, where I'm asked, and as I have done for the last 2 years. And Councillor Summerfield, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you if there's concerns of my leadership, because this is all about improving what we do, and more than happy to do that. But I'd also like to acknowledge the support of the many folk who've reached out to me over the last 24 hours, and in fact 2 weeks when this was brought to the table, those in the gallery and those watching online, and the many that can't join in today. I appreciate that, and I acknowledge the tenacity of Councillor Von Hoff and look forward to supporting the Mayor and councillors over the next 2 years.
Councillors, you know, the essential thing about an organisation of this nature in my lifetime in local government has been that we work as a team, and I hope that we can continue to do that with our staff, our senior staff, particularly in the coming period of time. I've had some interesting conversations with many of our senior staff, but I really do appreciate each and every one of them, the work they put into this organisation. We have a massive role to play. Can I congratulate you, Councillor MacDonald, and can I thank Councillor Von Hoff for her nomination and her passion for this organisation. We'll move then, councillors, to item 7, which is reception of deputation and delegations by appointment. Now, councillors, today we have Kerry Saul and Andrew Violin from the Empire Theatres, and who will be presenting their third quarter update. Councillors, if there is one impressive thing in this community that many people continue to talk about, it is our Empire Theatre. And it was just the other day that I was talking to an artist from elsewhere who made it very, very clear to me that how fortunate we are that we have the Empire Theatre, how fortunate we are that they won that particular vote by the odd vote to keep the Empire Theatre. So, Kerry, with those few words, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to acknowledge we're standing on the lands of the Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples and pay respect to their elders past and present. Good morning, an interesting morning. The Empire Theatre over the last couple of years has had a bit of a run, as you would all be aware, and of course our whole community has as well. We're here today to provide an update on where we're up to across this financial period. And I'll start with what we've got. Oh, perhaps not. So the major production, We Will Rock You. 6,018 tickets sold. Some of you will know how good this show was. It was fantastic. We were able to get through the production without major COVID-related issues, although there was definitely and audience impact across the stage, across the season. Even though we did 6,000, we would expect in a normal space to have added another 1,000 to that. So we know our audiences are still soft. Our major production does significant things for our community, for our arts community, and for your businesses in the city. 6,000 tickets has a direct cash benefit of $275,000 to our city. This is the extra spend per ticket that has been worked out nationally by Culture Counts. $46 a ticket, sold or otherwise, for every ticket that goes through the theatre, goes into the community. Our cast were local, except for 2. Just on 50% were new to the Empire, and some are seasoned performers. I note the young lady who played Scaramouche, Kate Hudson-James, has come through the Empire Theatre Youth Arts program. Who would know that she wasn't an international performer? What an amazing young woman. Our major production has a significant community outcome in the form of training, of introducing new people to the music theatre scene, and meets many of our strategic goals. ALIA, which you see up there, some of my board like to know what the acronyms are, Australian Lighting Industry Association. So we've had 3 national articles coming off of We Will Rock You, and have had great critical success. The Regional Arts Services Network. A new contract has been executed with Empire Theatres, which is a $925,000 contract across 3.5 years. The last 3 years provided $1.5 million of match funding to the $375,000 of program funding we received for the arts in South West Queensland. Empire Theatre's reputation for this delivery has provided us the opportunity to be involved in the next iteration. 272 artists and 62 First Nations artists were paid, and 75 partnerships across government and private sectors were established. We connected artists across the region and certainly had an impact in Toowoomba with some great events. The new contract encompasses the southern Queensland region, now including the Gold Coast, Redlands, Logan, Ipswich, and continues all the way through to Paru, and will require an extra 1 full-time equivalent in the form of 2 part-time positions. The current tender does not include program funding, and we expect this to be significantly more than the last period due to the increased scope of our delivery area. RASN assists the Empire with networking, improving the reputation of our organisation with government, our region and peers, and also provides a diversified income stream. We're proud to be, again, part of this Queensland-wide service. Community engagement. The inaugural annual dance affair. You may not have heard of this yet. You should. So this is a project that has picked up around about $70,000 of arts funding federally and on a state basis. It's not a project about audience, funnily enough, even though it is a performance. The cost of it is way, way beyond what an audience recovery would be, a la a show that we do at the theatre. It's a community engagement project. It's also being done in Western Downs with different participants, and you're invited to the ultimate night at the dance hall. Part theatre performance, part invitation to get up and dance. This is an all-ages event that immerses everyone in an evening of old time and new time dance floor magic. It's created with and for the local community. The inaugural annual dance affair is a celebration of the Toowoomba region's dance culture and local history. Features a cracking live band, a charming MC, light-footed guest stars and heartwarming real stories from local community regions. The producers have been working with a cross-section of the community to create a performance that's for them and for the public. It's a step back in time, as well as a capsule of what is happening in our community today. By the end of the night, your dance card will be full. You'll be armed with the ultimate essential dance moves. There'll be prizes, supper, a meat tray, plus a Belle of the Ball award for anyone who wants to get dressed up. No dance experience, there's a great night out for everyone. It's at the Toowoomba Indoor Bowls Hall, across the road from the theatre. It doesn't fit in our spaces, and it needs to be in somewhere that was an old-time dance hall. So I encourage councillors to have a look. It's 2 nights, You even get a supper made by the Friends, I believe. But it's a different thing, and it's a community engagement exercise, not so much we want you to come and pay for a ticket and sit and watch something. The Community Access Fund, across the year so far, we've had 4 schools able to attend shows so far. We've had a few pull out with floods and COVID and those sorts of things. Take Me to Paris, Guess How Much I Love You, 13-Story Treehouse, Edward the Emu. About 240 kids so far have managed to get to us. For the councillors that aren't intimately involved, Councillor O'Shea and Councillor McMahon are our representatives on this program. We do get an application from schools and, generally speaking, try and assist the ones that have a lower socioeconomic base or have not attended for a number of years. So we've actually, and it's not just local schools. So I think we had one from John Darien recently that managed to get in to see a show. As well as that, we have 10 applicants who are able to access venue rental assistance via the Community Access Fund. And that can be organisations such as the Choral Society, but also some very small organisations that are being given the opportunity to increase the arts outcomes in the city. Budget update. $170,000 of capital replacement of stage communication systems were fully installed and in action for We Will Rock You, and they saved the staff hours in setup and improved stage safety. My head mechanist, Rob, turned to me and said, that was amazing. For those of you who saw Rock You and all of the movement of the stairs on stage, the guys underneath them were wearing this new system and no one got run over. So that's pretty important. And it was so seamless. So we're very grateful that that was up and running. We are operating within budget. We have a strong program for the rest of 2022, and we're trying to make sure we've got enough staff to handle that. We have audience numbers still being a risk. Ticket sales are arriving later and definitely not back to pre-COVID levels. However, we have a strong level of bookings in our program for the rest of 2022. So it's a bit of a period where we're sort of seat of the pants stuff where we know we've got lots and lots of stuff coming, but it does rely on our audience turning up. So there's still risk over the next 12 months. I think the Chief Health Officer said it's all good unless we get another variant that causes trouble. And we're in that world. If people stay home, our budget will fly out the window quite quickly. We are going through a strategic plan review, and I'd like to commend the TRC on moving forward on a cultural strategy and plan for the city and region. I think it's incredibly important that as a city we're seen to have that strong cultural edge, and I do commend the council on moving forward with that. And I'll hand over to Andrew to have a little bit of chat about this strategic planning. And I should press the last button.
We'll take questions at the end of the 2 presentations. Andrew, Chairman of the Board.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So as Kerry has just told you, we're having our tri-annual strategic review being held on the 23rd of May. We have an external facilitator. Her name is Liz Buckley. She is an expert relating to cultural programs. In the past, we may have either conducted it in-house or used someone who was just more of a facilitator generally. This time, though, we've chosen to use someone who has specific arts experience, because obviously the arts industry has gone through a number of significant challenges over the last 2 to 3 years, with that being Captain Obvious relating to COVID. And Liz has already provided us with a working paper that the board is working through with some of the systemic issues that is facing the arts industry, and Kerry's just touched on one of them, audience numbers. Audiences are coming back, albeit slowly, but one of the things we're seeing as an example of people are booking much later than they normally would. Toowoomba people are notoriously late attendees or bookers for events to begin with, but obviously in light of everything that's going on at the moment, they're being extra cautious. Things like that will help dictate the strategic direction in which the board is going to take the organisation and Kerry's request for resourcing, etc. Also, I just want to, from a public point of view, acknowledge the work being done with TRC, not only the councillors, Tim and James, thank you for your support, gents, but also with the officers as well. I'd like to specifically call out Anne-Marie Johnson as well for everything she does to support us. Thank you very much. And I've noted in the 4 years that I've been chair, a surprise, that I haven't actually publicly thanked Kerry and his team for everything that they've done with the theatre, and I think we'd all appreciate that over the last 12, 18 months, it's been incredibly challenging. So I just want to take this public forum to thank Kerry and his team for everything that you've done for the theatre. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Kerry. Are there any questions for either of Andrew or Kerry? Councillor James.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Kerry and Andrew. Kerry, probably I just wanted to touch on the point you made before, just about that program with those grants and introducing children to the theatre and how far it stretches. And as you said, having a look at those grants as they come through, the value that they are as opposed to the value socially that they deliver, not only for the theatre but also those schools, I think is something that probably isn't talked about enough, but the results that come from those grants. And you read through some of those reports and it's to have the kids come to the theatre for the very first time, or to be able to present something at a theatre like this for the first time. It's something that I think that this region through TRC and obviously the Empire Theatre should be really proud of.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Carroll Taylor.
Not questions, Mr Mayor. I'd like to follow up on Councillor James's comments. And Emu Creek was one of those schools that had never been in, and each child, and you know they had never been. A lot of them had never been. The joy on their faces, and John Darien would have been the same. So it's very special for them to be there. But I personally wanted to thank the team on putting together and staging We Will Rock You. I can't tell you, and I'm sure everyone felt the same, how wonderful it was to get out and actually socialise after so much time. And of course I'm on my own now, so it's very, very important. Just the pre-show function was just wonderful to see people you hadn't seen for quite, maybe 2 years even. So, and I know that was quite a gamble for the theatre. So just know that the community's still talking about it, and it was such a great, fun night. And so have to say thank you on behalf of our community, and that's of course what we're all here for. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other comments around the room? Can I simply sum up by repeating almost most of what I said previously, but in saying that I think the model that there is with the whole process going forward at the Empire Theatre is a brilliant one. It's got community ownership, it's got community management, and it's working perfectly for Toowoomba. And when I spoke to this acclaimed presenter the other day, they were delighted, suggesting as much as that Toowoomba is probably the most beautiful theatre that they've performed in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll read a comment that the councillors will get on the infographic for the third quarter, if I can manage to keep my phone up. We've become used to the high standards the Empire offers. The staff were so welcoming and professional and made sure everything ran smoothly. We wish we could do all our shows at this beautiful theatre. Glenn, Kitty Flanagan, tour manager. Wouldn't it be great to have Kitty every weekend? Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks, Andrew. Councillors, we might continue for a while until around about 10:30, then we may be able to stop for a morning tea. We move now to take the receptions and consideration of committee reports. But before we do so, our values, of course, are accountability, safety and well-being, teamwork, honesty and respect. And can I particularly take this opportunity of thanking our senior staff, all of our staff, in fact, for the work that they do to make the delivery of what is expected of us to be done so well. We move to item 8.1, which is the Planning and Development Committee report. Does anyone wish to take any of those matters out of there for separate consideration? So there's item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6, item 8 and item 9. Would someone like to move the receipt of that, please?
So, Mr Mayor, I note that item 8 is later in the agenda. If not, I would like to pull that out. Thank you. I don't have to. Thank you, Mr CEO. Thank you.
You don't need to, because the recommendation was that it be considered in confidential. So by adopting that, it moves it to confidential.
Thank you.
Nothing else to be taken out? A mover, please, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Carl. Those in favour? Motion is carried. We move then to the Water and Waste Committee. There are 3 items there for consideration. Does anyone wish to take any of those out? If not, do I have a mover? Councillor Summerfield has moved. A seconder, please. Councillor Carl. Any comments? Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to item 6. It's been taken out separately, didn't we? Just a moment.
Mr Mayor, if I might.
So the previous motion was items 3 and 4. That recorded. And we deal now with item 6, which is a new energy generation invitation tender stage 3 update. Would someone like to move it accordingly? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, Councillor Melissa Taylor. Any comments? No, it's confidential. Those in favour? Those against? Vote recorded, Councillor Summerfield. I can't hear that. Councillor Summerfield wishes to have a vote recorded. She voted against that. Okay, we move then to item 8.3, which is the Infrastructure Committee report. One matter there. Anybody wishing to debate in any way that? If not, a mover, please. Councillor Melissa Taylor, Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to Environment and Community Services. I refer to Councillor Von Hoff and my own declaration of interest there. So the first motion will be dealing with all items except item... Just a moment. Brian? All those except for item 3? All those except for item 3, then we deal with item 3 separately. Councillor O'Shea has moved.
No, I'd like to pull item 9. It's in confidential though.
3 and 9?
Yep.
Good. All those except item 3 and 9. Councillor O'Shea has moved. Councillor McMahon has seconded. Except for 3 and 9. All those in favour? That's carried. We move then to the second motion, which will be to do with item 9, I would imagine. Righto. Item 3, and of course rows 5362, Councillor Von Hoff is involved in there. And the third motion in item 3 will be row 43, which I'm involved in. So the second motion is without... Just give me some guidance there, please, CEO. The second motion is without 53 and 62. Yep. And the next motion will be row 43 when I leave the room. Righto. The first motion, the second motion, in fact, is all items in 3 except... It'll be rows 53 and 62. Okay. Someone like to move accordingly, please? Councillor O'Shea and McMahon. Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to the third motion, which is when I must leave the room.
Councillors, the motion's there before you, which is item 3, row 43. Moved by Councillor O'Shea, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously.
So we've moved to the fourth motion. So everything except, in item 3, except rows 53, 62 and 43. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor McMahon, Senator O'Shea. Those in favour? Motion is carried. The fifth motion relates to strategic land acquisition, Kubi Dam. Was that to be withdrawn?
Yeah, I want some questions in relation to that. So
It's a confidential matter.
it is confidential. I haven't seen it.
So perhaps, Mayor, we just move that item to the end of the confidential items.
Righto. Someone like to move accordingly, please?
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I might say that the General Manager Environment and Community sent an email out this morning covering a lot of that detail, but I'm happy to move that we leave it till the end, yeah.
You have moved that we put it into confidential, seconded by Councillor Shine. Those in favour? It's carried.
Mr Mayor?
Yes?
Thank you. As a result of numerous questions last week at committee in relation to both Kubi Dam report and the Pittsworth water supply report, could we ensure that these reports are fully encompassing of all the detail, particularly around the financial impacts?
Okay.
Please?
So you're suggesting you need a more complete report than you've been receiving? Is that what you're saying? Okay. That's just simply a request, and it's been noted by the CEO. We move then to item 8.5, which is Finance and Business Strategy Committee. There's no matters there to deal with. Would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor McDonald and Shine. Those in favour? It's carried. Economic Development Committee. Would someone like to move we accept that report? Councillor Carol Taylor has moved. The seconder, please. Councillor O'Hara Sullivan has seconded. Those in favour? That's carried. Well, councillors, how are we going for time? Do you want a break for 5 minutes now? And we'll come back and we'll deal with the someone like to move? Move accordingly. Councillor McDonald and Councillor Seconder, please. Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? Carried. we'll move to item 9, which is the monthly financial performance statement. I'll hand over to Anne-Marie. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Morning, councillors, morning, Mayor. Presenting the monthly financial performance statement, councillors, for the period ending 31st of March. So I'm 3/4 way through the financial year. I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions. We've had budget review too during the month, so you can notice the variances are quite minimal there, with the exception of labour and capital.
Are there any questions for the acting GM? Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you. I note that the unrestricted cash expenses ratio exceeds what is recommended 3 to 6 months. It's 6.18 months. Do you have any concerns as a result of that excess?
Thanks, councillor. So at this point in time, we've levied all the rates for the year, so there will be no more significant income for the rest of the financial year. So the cash on hand we have now is to cover our expenditure for the next 3 months. That plus the fact that we are behind budget on capital at the moment, and we expect that to escalate over the next couple of months, and also that we have budgeted for the EV increase, which will be processed in the next couple of weeks and backdated to 1 July. So that will compensate for that a little bit over the recommended benchmark, but we're confident that we're tracking as per the parameters.
Just on a further matter, the capital expenditure expenditures below budget by 17%, which is concerns about that prospects for improving quality.
And yes, councillors, we are concerned about capital at the moment. At this point in time, we have 190 vacancies, and the supply chain deliveries are still a significant issue for council. We are expecting an escalation over the next couple of months, and we know that there are some major projects in the pipeline that will be delivered before the 30th of June, including Mankind and Stage 4. So a couple of those big projects are on track to be completed by the 30th of June, but it's been a slow start.
Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Anne-Marie, can you just remind me, with the contributed assets variance there, what's that due to again?
So the contributed assets, we usually leave them to the last couple of months, and we need our asset custodians to prepare the documentation for capitalisation. So they still have to be capitalised and added into our asset register. So the work is in progress, but we get about $15 billion. That's the usual figure we get every year. So they're usually truck infrastructure.
Just in terms of the variance, I was just curious. You probably told us why there's such a variance there, but I just can't remember what it was.
It's the work is being prepared at the moment, so that's a phasing error. So we are on track at this point in time to have that full 15 million capitalised by the 30th of June.
Okay, so that's quite a common sort of variance. Can I ask another question, Mr Mayor? What keeps you up at night, Anne-Marie, in terms of finances?
The capital delivery program.
Are there any further questions for Anne-Marie? Yeah. Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mayor. Probably a comment and then a question to follow up, and probably in line a little bit with Councillor Shine. Anne-Marie, historically, this financial year we're spending around about $10 million a month on capital program. We've got 3 months to go, which means on average $30 million a month. Historically, we've spent around $30 million in June of each year. Noting that you've said there's bigger projects coming through, is there a conversation within the finance branch and perhaps at ELT around our capital program for next year, given the complexities of this year around labour shortages and also supply? Because we had higher hopes that we'd be a bit further advanced than what we are now, based on our predictions. So is there a conversation starting in regard to next year's capital works?
Yeah, that's a conversation that I've been having with the CEO now at this point in time. What compounds it is the fact that our software costs will be moving from capital to operational. So that 165 million sustainability target is certainly up for review at the moment.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Are there any further questions for Anne-Marie? If not, would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? The monthly financial performance statement. Someone like to move that? Councillor Shine and Councillor McDonald. Those in favour? Motion is carried. Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. We move then to group item 10, the group reports. Item 10.1 is planning and development. Acting GM, Michelle.
Morning, councillors, and let me take the opportunity to hope that you've had a good break and well rested. And today I'm here to provide the opportunity to ask any questions about the group report for the planning and development group.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Michelle. Hope you're enjoying your acting role. Good to see you here. So 10.1, the first dot point on page 1 about eliminate Toowoomba CBD mentions in there that you met with the Chamber of Commerce, but that was the only group you met with. I was really surprised at that there wasn't a broader input, like from business owners who actually would benefit from this, but also users of the CBD at night particularly. I just feel like we've limited our consultation with people in relation to what I think is a really important project for our CBD. It's going to bring the CBD to more life, which is what everyone wants, and make it prettier. So I was just really disappointed that you limited it to the expert advisory panel and the CBD.
Thank you, Councillor Summerfield. This was simply a scoping workshop, not the actual commencement of the project itself. So the expert panel, representatives of council and the Chamber of Commerce as the lead for representing businesses and groups within the Toowoomba CBD were our core stakeholders for a workshop to identify what the scope of the project would be, subject to consideration of council's budget for the following financial year. The project would certainly include broader consultation through the development of the strategy itself.
No, that's really great news. And so that was the other thing that concerned me, was that last sentence, which is about developing a future lighting strategy subject to resources being available to prepare the strategy. So I guess we have to make sure in our budget that we keep an eye on that to make sure that it's included, because I'd hate to see that pushed aside and not progressed. So then the second thing was the next stop point, which is the Environment Advisory Committee, and it says in there was strong support for more interactive presentations where the group could provide expert input into important strategic projects such as the planning scheme and climate risk management strategy. Have the committee been made aware of the terms of reference, which means that any support or advice that they want to give council has to come through councillors for approval before anything like that actually happens?
Yes, it is my understanding that they have, councillor. I guess the feedback was based on the fact that they received a couple of presentations at the last meeting regarding the planning scheme process and the climate risk management strategy, and their desire to be key stakeholders in that process, and there'll be opportunities through the consultation phases of those projects to also engage not only with this advisory committee but other advisory committees as well. But certainly I guess the makeup of this committee based on the councillors' terms of reference does include people with professional and substantial experience in environment matters, so they were keen to be able to provide input at the appropriate times.
Thank you, and we appreciate and respect their input, just the due process needs to be followed. Thanks.
Councillor Shine.
Thanks.
Councillor Shine, sorry, I didn't have the mic on.
Thanks, thanks, Michelle, for your report. I'm just wondering if you could look at page 2 under development services, and the second point, there were 3 we're figuring a lot of REI applications for the term of the planning team with a 33% term. That is 1 out of 3. That to a layperson seems low. And I was wondering whether staff shortages or other considerations would explain that.
Councillor Shine, I may have to take it on notice as to the exact reasons, but certainly acknowledge that the team has had certainly peaks in terms of the development applications that have been coming through the system since over the last 12 months, and also sometimes the complexity of these types of applications, but I'm happy to seek further input from that team and provide that advice to you.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment about Councillor Summerfield's comment about the Eliminate Toowoomba. Councillor Carl was chairing that session and we had these people from the expert panel. And it was just such a fantastic workshop. Like, I thought that we were just going to talk about having a couple of fairy lights in the corner of Ruthven and Margaret, but it was so much more than that, and I think you would love coming along to that and anything involved in that, because it was just such a big sort of picture look at how to make the CBD more beautiful and safe and more interactive and lighting up buildings, and so I think you'd really enjoy it if you came along and met.
I'd love to. Send me an invite.
Yes.
I would too.
Any further questions? Any comments? If not, thanks very much, Michelle. And would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Shine. Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to infrastructure services. Eric? Oh, sorry, water and waste. No.
Good morning, councillors. Report is presented there. I suppose the only item of note that I think I draw your attention to is the continued wet weather and flooding events that spilled into March, and the significant amount of works we're having to do to get access to properties. We still currently have about 14 roads closed across the area, mainly lower order roads, but there is still a number of roads closed. But I present the report. Any questions on the report?
Any questions for the acting GM? Councillor Summerfield, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Eric. I just, in relation to the weather station upgrade at the Toowoomba Aerodrome, I think that's a fantastic thing, providing real-time weather conditions for pilots flying in, so that's great. But I did wonder, I was quite horrified, and I'm sure you've seen lots of them, but O'Leary Road out of Clifton, the photo in the report showed quite clearly the significant erosion of that road and how dangerous it is. It's nearly impossible to even get around it. I just wonder how long a road such as that, which I imagine gets high use, would be closed for, and I know how long a piece of string could be going through your mind at the moment with the number of roads that you are dealing with, but that's quite amazing.
Yeah, there are some roads that will be a matter of months before we get to them. We've tried to get basic access as quickly as we can, but by basic access I mean it's by no means finished. We will have to come back down and restore the roads properly. But some of these roads where the water is still up, where we have significant erosion, it will be a month, possibly 2 months before they have basic access again. But we're working with the community. Generally, there are other alternative routes to reach there. So,
Thanks.
Further questions? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Sorry, thanks, Mr Mayor. Eric, the zero tailpipe emission light vehicle as part of the smart parking project, the mowers, and they're also mentioned in Nick's report as well. I think they're the same ones. In terms of, apart from having some hybrids in our fleet,
Is this the first sort of steps towards getting something that isn't combustion engine, if that's the right terminology?
Yes, well, the car is it's not a hybrid, it's a fully electric vehicle. So effectively, other than the hybrids, and they are the first steps along that journey that will grow in the future.
Where's the electric vehicle? Where's the electric vehicle? Is there an electric car, is there?
Yes.
Oh, and who's driving that?
That's, I think in the report it mentions about the smart parking project. It'll be utilised on that, and it'll be based out of the main offices here in Harry Street.
Okay, thank you. I must miss that. Sorry, yeah, thank you.
Councillor O'Shea.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, whether it's to Eric or potentially Councillor Melissa might be able to answer. I was just curious around the smart parking project. So we did free parking in March, and now we're back on in April, and now with the installation of smart parking, we'll have free parking again essentially between May and June. Is that wrong? Do I read that correctly? With the installation of the meters, is that? Sorry, through Councillor Melissa. Well, that's the first question. The second one is that maybe again through Councillor Melissa. I guess I was just curious how the first info session that we had with people regarding that.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor O'Shea. So just to update Council on that situation, yes, the month that we had, which finished very early April, has finished, but because of the new parking strategy, the smart parking strategy going into play, we actually have to take out some of the older parking meters. So to facilitate the ease of that program happening, there are some areas that won't be charged parking because of that facilitation of the implementation of new meters. But be aware that the limits still do apply. Sorry.
Yeah, the info.
And the information session, I've had some good feedback on that, and we do intend to have more sessions within the next couple of months, and also some sessions to different groups around the region talking about that as well. So there's also Todd Roll and myself, the Chair of Chamber of Commerce, will also be doing some walks around the city just to talk to businesses if they've got any questions as well. There's also some incredible information on the TRC website as well about the strategy, the implementation, and there's some extensive FAQs, frequently asked questions, and answers available here as well.
Thanks to Councillor Melissa. Just sort of, it's great to hear, and it's great to hear the engagement around it because we know it's a big change for our community and one that we know long term will be great, but just the initial teething process, so it's great to see that engagement, and also it's probably a good news story in 391 parks being free for a couple of months as well. Thanks, Chair.
I've got Kerry, Councillor Shine, you're next.
Thanks, Mayor. Really, it's the same topic as raised by Councillor O'Shea in relation to the pop-up session. Just wondering, do either Councillor or Eric have any information about the number of people that were actually participated in the pop-up session? I'm interested, I know Councillor Taylor would be concerned that prior to the introduction on the 1st of July, that the community, as far as possible, was well informed about what's going to happen. Particularly different age groups might find it difficult to adapt, and I would have thought that people haven't been raising with me, I must say, and it's still early days. But just wondering, with that first one, was it significant interest shown or not?
I'd have to take that on notice.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Councillor Shine. I don't have the specific numbers, but I do know that there was significant engagement from those within the CBD, particularly around that area, from businesses, but also passing foot traffic. It was at Carnival Lane, but the other pop-up stores will be in different spots around the CBD. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, I'm sorry, where they will be, but I know that they are in significant places around city centre for information. And I know that the community engagement team are also making presentations to different groups around the region as well. So it won't just be CBD or city centre centric.
Finish, Councillor Shine.
The only thing I forgot to mention was to thank Eric and his team. The photos that Councillor Summerfield referred to are really illustrative of the work that has to be done, is being done. And all councillors here greatly appreciate the efforts of particularly all councillors, but particularly those.
Thank you, Councillor Shine. Councillor Carroll-Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on that Aguirre Road, I mean, this happened in 2011, so it's huge, the damage that's done, and there's nothing shows it like a photograph, is there? Through you, Mr Mayor, to Eric, just wondering, I know GMR bridge builders are just as smashed as what we are really with work, but I'm just wondering, has the Emu Creek Bridge at Felton been tended to, or is it still in the single lane? Do you know, Eric? Take that on notice anyway, thank you. But perhaps you might just remind councillors and the public that this is the last DFA arrangements, that some of these things won't be properly restored for quite some time, and you know that we'll make them as drivable as we can, but the full restoration won't be able to be made, and but they have to be made under those arrangements. It might be remind councillors and the community about that. Thank you, Eric.
Are there any further questions?
Sorry,
Oh, yeah, you answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, the process, because of the scale of the event, where we still don't have a good handle on the figure, but as we mentioned earlier, it could be anywhere 50 upwards to $100 million worth of damage. To undertake that amount of work will take a significant period of time and a significant level of resources. Under the Disaster Recovery Financial Arrangements, or the DRFA, we have 2 full financial years. So it will be in June 24 when our deadline is for having the works done, and it will be, we won't be having the roads open and fully restored within 12 months. It will be an extended period of time to have that. As I mentioned earlier, we try to get basic access as quick as we can, but for the full restoration works, it will be at least 2 and a bit years.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that because people are sitting there waiting and not realising that we are following a process.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Can I just simply say, Eric, to you and to Mike Brady and the whole team, the work that I've been invited to a number of meetings with Major General Jake Elwood, who's obviously the State Recovery Coordinator. The preparation that's gone into some of the submissions to go to him. I'm very proud to be part of an organisation that does that. And I think you'd find that Elwood, in some of the communications I've had with him, he's firstly appreciative of your preparation. He's also admires the work that's done here in terms of flood mitigation. He's been around and seen a lot, and I think it's a good connection that we've got with him, and I thank you and the staff very much for making that and putting the facts on the table in such a way. It certainly impressed him. Okay, anybody else with any questions? Not, Councillor Taylor has moved. Seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. Those in favour? That's carried. That's the receipt of that report. Thank you very much, Eric. Now, back to water and waste services. Sorry about that. I was watching the highlight in red here and it had Eric's name there, so I got distracted.
Very well.
You'll have to forgive me for that.
You're forgiven, sir. Take the report as read. Mr Mayor, any questions through you?
Any questions around the room in respect to the water and waste portfolio? Services, Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thank you, Damien, for your report. Can you just talking about the Mount Kynoch water treatment plant, can you just possibly expand a little bit on what the community engagement will be what's happening there, I'm quite concerned about the traffic or the possible interruption to traffic, because that highway, as we all know, is very well used and can get quite busy, particularly morning and afternoon peak times. So what's the community engagement plan for that, please?
Councillors, I'll take some of that as a question on notice and circulate the community engagement plan. In short, much of Shuttlewood Court will be under traffic management control. Members of the public will still be able to get into the laboratory to drop off samples. That service has been continued, but I'll circulate an update for you in relation to that. Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to Mr Platts. I'm wanting to make a comment on the smoke testing program and how important that is, and perhaps to highlight to the community when we've had a flood event like we've had in February and then in March, how inadequate private plumbing and illegal connections can affect our network and cause really, really horrible outcomes, I suppose, for some people. I guess that there's a bit of ignorance out there, Mr Platts.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Yes, there is a little bit of education still to be done, and there's materials available on our websites. In equity property, there is an event called an ORG, and in some of the older style buildings, there are some different configurations. An ORG is essentially that little PVC vent that you see over near one of your toilets, and that is supposed to be the lowest point in the house. Often people, when they build a house, it's compliant, and then subsequently go and put pots on top of the vent, or house pots of plants on top of the other valves. And or they do build landscaping and think it'd be nice to have the backyard all level. I don't like this trip hazard that they think of. And that becomes a point where stormwater in the backyard can get down into the sewer system. It's raised above the natural level of the land for a reason. Sometimes you find people who have done renovations in houses, particularly a downstairs bathroom or toilet or something that they've done in their basement, and that becomes the new lowest point. And you can have, it is a life-changing experience to have a sewer overflow, even if it comes out correctly in the ORG outside your property. That happened in my property only a few months ago, and it takes a little while to clean that up. But if it goes indeed past that because the network can't function the way it's designed and it goes into your house, the houses are uninhabitable. The mould and the bacteria and all of the materials in there basically have to be stripped and destroyed. So thank you very much for the question, Councillor.
And a further question there, Councillor Tim, you had a question?
Thanks, Chair. Damien, just Clifton, the water treatment plant, you said it's progressing in that you're going to get the water samples to Mount Conox to be tested before it's turned on. First of all, I thought it'd be bigger than that, to be honest, so technology's come a long way, but is there any reason why it wouldn't be confirmed by Mount Conox? Like, is it formality, is it, or is it like...
Oh no, it's testing. A reverse osmosis treatment plant is a sophisticated piece of kit. It's treating all of the shallow bore water and then only a proportion of the deep Great Artesian Basin bore water. Some of the coding that we got originally worked in the factory, and then when we got it to site, it wasn't quite working. So there's been some delays with the coding and getting the plant to operate the way we want it to operate. They're putting the filters in today and planning is for water testing tomorrow and training of our operators later this week. So it is progressing. There is a bit of a delay due to the flood and a little bit of problems with the code, but yes.
Right, thanks.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Damien. I'm just wondering, we were advised the other day at a meeting that the sewer ponds at Clifton still haven't been lined. I'm just wondering what the timeline is for them. That was, I think, November 2019.
Correct. There is a capital program in this year, and the majority of it is in next year for the wastewater treatment plant ponds there, and then for the reticulation of the wastewater off to the irrigation area that we're planning to have. So there is a progression on that, and I'm happy to circulate an update in relation to that if you would like.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? If not, would someone like to move the Water and Waste Services report be received, please? Councillor Melissa Taylor, Councillor Tim McMahon. Those in favour? Carried. Move then to Environment and Community Services. Nick?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. I'm happy to present the Environment and Community Services Group report to you. And with that, take the report as read, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Councillor Melissa Taylor, question?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Hi, Nick. Thanks. Is it St Patrick's Day today?
Do you like the green shirt?
I do like the green shirt. I actually had this question ready to go this morning, and it was interesting that the Chair, Andrew Violert, mentioned it in his presentation this morning, because I was actually going to ask about the cultural strategy and how that was going, because I don't know, time goes quickly, but it seems in excess of 12 months since we sat down to have the chat with the consultant and with the amount of dollars invested in the process. Just wanted to know where we're at with that.
Yeah, look, I don't have an update at hand. I'd have to seek an update and advice from the Manager of Library and Cultural Services around that. I'm not sure that we have committed a large amount of funds for that. I think it's something that we're doing from existing budgets, and it's doesn't have a large financial commitment from us at this point in time. But I'll get that update and circulate that to the councillors.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Councillor Carroll, you have a question?
Not a question, Mr Mayor, but to comment on the First Five Forever team and what they've done here. You look at in collaboration with the Empire, again the Empire, playing its role in our community, and the Toowoomba Concert Orchestra, that 72 families in attendance in Millmerra, and then going to Oakey, Toowoomba, Crow's Nest, Nambunja, Gowrie Junction, Highfields, Pittsworth and Clifton with over 2,000 children. How amazing is that? To take that out there. We were talking before when Andrew and Kerry were talking about the Empire and how some of those students have never been in here, but how amazing is it to take that out to them? And I'd like to pass on my thanks to the team, because I used to be very involved with this, with reading at First Five Forever. That seems to no longer happen with councillors, but it's such an amazing program and involves children from toddlers right through to, you know, prep and maybe in some cases grade ones. But I just think it's fantastic. It's something we don't often think about, the things we support at all levels of our community, and to have it in here can't go without a comment from me, because I think it's amazing, and I think the community, those community areas out there really appreciate it. Could you pass on thanks to the team? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Chair, thanks. If I could provide Councillor Melissa some update to the question she brought earlier. Last week, the first meeting of the Regional Arts Development Fund Advisory Committee met, and the main objective was that we actually provided sufficient funding for that cultural program strategic document to be funded and completed. We want it done properly, we want it done well, we want it done with external voices, as many of them as we can get. So just to answer your question, happy to announce that has been fully funded through the RADAF committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Summerfield, I just look, there's a bit of something being distributed in the room. I've not seen it before, Brad.
Yeah, it's a big priority. So, Nick, thank you through you, Mayor, to Nick, General Manager. I've just got a couple of questions. The battery operated mowers, I'm really curious how many hours you get out of your battery.
They go on charge each night when they return to the depot, so they're operational for the next day. So I'm not sure how long they last for without that charge, but they're a very new addition, still under trial. Haven't had an opportunity to see them in operation myself as yet, but I'll try and do that. But provisions made for them to be plugged in every night and recharged.
That's good then. Good to see, and also good that you get a full day out of them. So Queen's Park, I can't keep my head spinning on the master plan there. What are we doing on the corner of Margaret and Hume? That's all fenced off at the moment.
That's the upgrade to the Viril Cars component, so that's we're drawing to a close of the implementation of the Queen's Park master plan now. So that's just the final stage of that Viril Cars component. I haven't seen the designs for that, but I could find them and circulate.
Would you? That'd be great, thank you, because I was curious. And then the Pittsburgh Aerodrome, I noticed there was a new lease for a hangar, a new lease, but I'm wondering, are they going to actually build a hangar there? Because it'd be great if they do.
I'd imagine so, if that's the purposes for hangarage. I'd imagine they are. I have to find the details of that for you too, Councillor Summerfield.
Yeah, I just wondered whether they were going to actually build a hangar or whether they were just going to park it there.
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you could do that as well, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor O'Shea.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a quick comment, if I may. Also in March, we had, just to update the chamber, we had the first meeting of the Multicultural Advisory Committee. So we met for the first time in March with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of really good faces around the table. So that was the first meeting of that. So great to see that that's now underway, and I'm pretty excited with the group, as I said, and just what prospect and be going from that. So. So there's a lot of enthusiasm around it, so I'm hoping we can maintain that for the next few years.
Thank you. In terms of the battery-powered mower, is it appropriate that we would publicise that in some way, given the significance of something of that nature? Have we, or is there an issue about commerciality involved?
No, I don't think there's any commerciality issues, Mr Mayor. We've purchased those with great assistance from Fleet as well, so lots of investigations there, and we've got these two machines now, so we could promote that, and we'll assess their performance over time. I think they've been around for a little while now. We're certainly not early adopters. We haven't been the first to rush in and experience the challenges that I think Councillor Summerfield might have been foreseeing, that we run out of power by lunchtime and all the rest. That's probably been there in the past, but this technology's had enough time now to develop and be robust enough, and we'll see how they go. Perhaps it's the future for us.
Could be a solar panel shade.
It's a great idea.
Well, it's very interesting that battery power must be improving dramatically, because in my mayoral report I'll tell you